Okay. Good afternoon, members. Good afternoon, officers, and good afternoon, members of the public. If before we start the meeting, I'd just like to make it so somebody's not on mute.
Oh, possibly me. Sorry, apologies.
Right. Can I just make it clear that the procedure that was sent out yesterday by Mr. White, that's the procedure we'll follow in the meeting? And can I make the point that as far as the chat box is concerned, please can it be restricted to just indicating whether you want to ask a question or whether you want to participate in the debate by speaking, and not for any other purpose. Before I start the meeting, Councillor Sweet, you had a comment to make on that.
Yes, please. I know that myself and a couple of other members used the comment box to alert the meeting, the officers and the members of like operational things. For example, other members not being able to get into the meeting.
Yes, that's okay.
So how do we comment on that? I asked Lisa Buckle if she could, present alter her presentation in a way. How do we make those comments?
You just put question or speak, and then I will deal with that straight away.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if we can officially start the meeting. First of all, apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chairman. Good afternoon, members. We have one apology from Councillor Rose this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. The minutes of the last meeting, we're required to approve as a correct record the We're required to approve as a correct record the minutes of the last panel meeting held on the 19th of November. Is it agreed that this is a correct record?
I'm happy to, well, if you're proposing that it is, I'm happy to second, Chairman.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Smurden. Is there any member wishes to raise any objection to that? No. Okay. 1 second, I'm just getting into my conversation box. Okay, so that's approved. Next, item 3, urgent business. There's no urgent business. Division of the agenda. There's no need to divide the agenda. Declarations of interest. On the agenda is the matter of Live West. Two of our members, that's Councillor Sweet and Councillor Kemp, are tenants, and as such they declare an interest. However, on consideration, they will be granted a dispensation, and in order to confirm that, I would ask Mrs. Folds, the Deputy Monitoring Officer, just to confirm that, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, both members, in my view, have what's called a disclosable pecuniary interest, which would normally require them to withdraw from the meeting. Both have requested that they can attend the part of the meeting where you have, I believe it's item 8, where you have the Live West presentation. There are provisions in the Localism Act to grant a dispensation where it would be in the interest, where the council considers that the dispensation would be in the interest of persons living within the council's area, or that the council considers it otherwise appropriate to grant a dispensation. That power, or that right to do a dispensation, is granted to myself, but in consultation with yourself as chairman of the committee and the vice chair, Councillor Smurden. And we have had a discussion about this, and we consider that the fact that members are tenants helps to give a better understanding of the issues that the tenants face, and can enable members to make a better decision or ask the right questions when working with registered providers and people like Live West. And that it would be nonsensical for members to receive a presentation without those members that are tenants of Live West. I think there's support for that, and so the dispensation would be granted solely for the purpose of that item, so that they could participate, and would cease at the end of that item. I don't think I've got anything else to say. So I hope that
Yes.
that makes sense. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Foles. That's most helpful. So if we could, other than those two interests, do any other members are invited to declare any personal disclosable pecuniary interests, including the nature and extent of such interest they may have in any items to be considered at this meeting. No. Okay, next item is the public forum. Mr. White.
No issues raised under the forum. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. The next item is the executive forward plan. Prior to the 5 o'clock on Monday, I put in a request that the relevant executive member provide an explanation to the panel as to the reasons why the matter of the electrical vehicle charging points was not included in the forward plan, and also why there's no mention in that plan of the recovery and renewal plan and the climate change and biodiversity strategy and action plan. So I've asked that members of the panel be given an explanation as to why those items are not included in the executive forward plan. Could I ask which executive member will respond? Whether is it Councillor Baldry or is it Councillor Pearce?
I will respond on electric charging points, Chairman.
And I'll do the other one, Chairman.
Okay. Councillor Baldry.
Well, I find this the most peculiar system, if I may so, Chairman. The point of this item on the agenda is in order to discuss points which are on the executive forward plan. It just open sesame if you can now put in any item, because it is not on the executive forward plan. It seems to me it's an upside down world. But I will answer the question about the electric charging points, and I'm sure there are officers here who may wish to add more. It is timely that this comes up now, because Mrs. Widdicombe attended a meeting of the procurement group for electric charging points at the beginning of this week, and we have a supplier on board to put in the electric charging points. The next stage will be that we agree leases for the parking bays, agree concession arrangements with the provider and profit share with them, and there is a phased programme which officers may want to amplify upon, which is that phase one, and there'll be 2 electric charging points in both places, one in Heath's Nursery car park in Totnes, in the Key car park in Kingsbridge, in Mayor's Avenue car park in Dartmouth, in the Creek car park in Salcombe, and the Park and Ride in Dartmouth. We will then go on to phase 2 if there is still enough funding available, and phase 2 will be the 4 Street car park in Kingsbridge, the Victoria Street car park in Totnes, and the Pavilions car park in Totnes. Finally, Poundwell Meadow car park in Modbury. I have other comments I might want to make about electric charging points, but as the executive member, there are 2 points I would like to say in the first place, is that I would not want to see any loss of income as a result of these charging points coming in. And I'm particularly concerned in much used car parks if we have a couple of electric charging points standing idle when customers who want to come and use the car park are not able to get in. And secondly, it is, I think, become normal for them to be put in prime places in car park. And that is something about which I have doubts. I think they should be put somewhere. If people want to come and charge their vehicles, they'd be willing to go anywhere in the car park. But that's enough from me, Chairman. I don't know if Mrs. Widdicombe or Mr. Brooks wish to say anything further.
Mrs. Widdicombe, Mr. Brooks? No. Councillor Baldry, thank you very much indeed, and we look forward to this appearing in a future executive forward plan. Councillor Pearce.
Yes. Well, at December Council, it was determined that the executive would take over the responsibility for the climate change action plan, and that at 6 monthly intervals it would come back to overview and scrutiny for scrutiny. Now, the forward plan, I think I'm correct in saying that we are only obliged to keep it up to date 2 months in advance. I think it could even be 6 weeks, but perhaps Mr. White can confirm that. It's either 6 weeks or 2 months.
It's 4 months, Chair.
It's 4 months.
Yes.
Well, okay. Well, it's 4 months, but in any event, we're only 1 month out from December. So if we're having a 6 monthly update, it doesn't yet need to be on the forward plan.
Okay, I just think Councillor Pearce, that members would like to be reassured that this.
Well, they are reassured. They are reassured. A decision was taken in council, Councillor Birch. And if you look at the forward plan, it only goes up to June.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Right. As there are no questions on that, thank you very much indeed, both of you, for the answers.
Chair, there's a question from Councillor Sweet.
No, I think Councillor Sweet.
Hi, just quickly for Keith, actually, my sound glitched out. Did you say that there was kind of a first phase of electric charging points in the car park? So did you say that Victoria Car Park and the pavilions would be the sort of second lot? It sort of glitched out.
I think I haven't got it in front of me anymore, but I've moved on. I don't know if one of the officers would like to run through it all over again.
You have to run through. I just wanted. Did you say that there was like a first phase and a second phase?
There is a first and second phase, yes.
Yeah, rather than have a repetition, I wonder if one of the officers could send an email to Councillor Sweet just to confirm what you said, Councillor Baldry, rather than taking up any further time.
That's fine. I think I've got it. That's perfect. Thank you.
Okay.
Chairman, I'll follow that up as well. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much indeed. Right. We'll now move on to item 8, which is the Live West presentation. So on behalf of the council, I'd like to extend a very warm welcome to Mr. Paul Crawford, the Chief Executive of Live West. Live West continued to be the largest social landlord in South Hams and a significant strategic partner, assisting us in delivery of a number of our key priorities, particularly around homes, well-being and the environment. Our officers work alongside them in the delivery of new homes, prevention of homelessness, issues of antisocial behaviour, and on occasions disrepair. As elected members, we are often asked to advocate on behalf of the residents, and it's very helpful to understand the role of the landlord in order to assist effectively. Mr. Crawford received in advance 18 questions put forward by members, and will seek to address them through the presentation and then afterwards with a further opportunity to ask questions about the content of the presentation. So I'll hand over to Mr. Crawford. Welcome, Mr. Crawford.
Thank you, Councillor Birch, and thank you for the time today. A couple of things, really just to give you a bit of background to myself. So I'm the Chief Executive of Live West and have been the Chief Exec since Live West formation in 2018. And I'm joined today by my Exec Assistant, Nicola Williams. We gave you a copy of the presentation yesterday, and it'd be really helpful to know who's driving that from your side, just so that I can indicate when we need to move from slide to slide. The purpose of the presentation, as you said, Councillor Burst, we had about 18 questions ahead of. I've tried to, where possible, include responses to those. Where we're getting to very specific scheme issues, I haven't, and I suggest we pick those up at the end if that's possible. Presentation will take about 20-25 minutes, and I'm very happy to take questions as we go through, but it might be better if I canter through this, and then we use our time at the end to address questions, if that's okay.
Yes, certainly. In other words, your presentation will not be interrupted. There'll be questions after you've completed your presentation. As to the presentation itself, presumably, Mr. White, you have that under control.
I'm driving that one. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Darryl. That's great.
Over to you, Mr. Crawford.
Well, with that introduction, thank you for the time. So, Darryl, if we could move on to the next slide, please. Right. So what I wanted to try and do is give a bit of background to Live West. A number of people have asked about Live West, a bit about our development activity, and I focused a fair bit of time around customer services. There were a number of questions around customer services, how we're supporting vulnerable people at the moment, how we're investing in our homes in terms of the energy efficiency agenda. And then, as we said, we'll take questions at the end. So if we could move on, Darryl, to the next slide. This is just a timeline of Live West. Live West has been in existence actually since the 60s, but really this timeline starts in 74, where Devon and Cornwall Housing was formed, and actually so was Nightstone Housing from the organisation. And you can see on the timeline in 1988, Nightstone merged with Taunton Deane Housing Association, and then in 2607, Penwith Housing in Cornwall and Tor Homes in South Hams joined the Devon and Cornwall Housing Group. And just to remind members who may not be familiar, the Tor Homes was formed in 1999 as a stock transfer from South Hams District Council. In 2011-12, the Devon and Cornwall Housing Group had a significant change, and we amalgamated all subsidiaries into one asset holding organisation to improve efficiencies and drive value out of the organisation. And 2015, Devon and Cornwall Housing merged with West Devon, again a stock transfer that formed in 1999. And in March 2018, Nightstone Housing Association merged with Devon and Cornwall Housing to create Live West that we know today. So if we could move on down to the next slide, please. So this is a chart showing where we own homes. In essence, we own homes from Gloucestershire, Bristol, all the way down to Cornwall and the Isles of Scilly. As at the end of last financial year, we owned just over 37,000 homes, and you can see here we actually own homes as at the end of last year, 3,800 just over in South Hams. In terms of the first column, it identifies where we've built homes last year. So overall, Live West built 1,158 affordable homes across our geography, of which 68 were in South Hams. And if you go to the right-hand side, you can see that of those 1,158, 783 were affordable rent, and the balance was for shared ownership. In terms of Live West's size, we're within the top 20 largest housing associations nationally, but we're also in the top 10 nationally developers of affordable housing, and within that, 6th nationally for the provision of social rented homes built, and 5th nationally for the number of affordable rented homes. And that's a really important factor for us, because we recognise that with house prices and incomes within the South West, providing homes for rent is a really crucial element of helping to alleviate the housing crisis that exists. So if we could move on, please, Darryl, to the next slide. This is an extract from our accounts last year, but it just summarises where we are. So we own, as I said, 37,000 homes, or just over. That's in 20 local authorities, all within the South West and all joining each other. Our business is a landlord, so we focus very much on delivering services and trying to improve customer satisfaction. So our customer satisfaction is just over 90% at the moment, with just over 85% satisfaction on repairs and 87% quality of the homes that people live in. And we do have an ambitious programme to develop homes. I think we all recognise that there's a desperate need for affordable homes. So our ambition is to build 15,000 homes over 10 years. About 30% of what we build is for sale, whether that's shared ownership or an open market. And the open market homes we build are very much for helping to generate a profit, which is used entirely to cross-subsidise the delivery of new affordable homes in the southwest. As I said a few minutes ago, we built just over 1,100 homes last year. We were due to build just over 1,200 homes this year, but with COVID and the various lockdowns, that is likely to be significantly reduced, and we anticipate that's going to be closer to about 750 homes. In terms of as Live West as an employer, we have 1,400 colleagues, but the work that we do, whether it's investing in our homes and building new homes, supports around 6,500 jobs within the southwest economy. And with so many employees, our focus is very much around how do we support people and maintain good employee satisfaction, which is high at 91%. And we have very high net promoter scores at 58%. And the last column just really gives you a sense of kind of financial scale and the investment that is there to support new homes. So we, as at today, have about £380 million of undrawn finances in place to build new homes. We launched a £1 billion debt portfolio last year, again entirely to help fund our development over the next 10 years. We do receive some grant from Homes England, about £125 million. And just to give you a sense of our net surplus or profit, last year our profit was around £62 million. This year it was estimated to be a similar number, but with COVID we're likely to see that reduced to somewhere in the region of 55 million. I just want to make the point though that we call it surplus, not profit, because the surplus doesn't actually leave the organisation. It goes back into entirely supporting the growth of new affordable homes. So if we could move on, please, Darryl, to the next slide. So, and again, please. So just to give you a sense of the development of homes, the top column, the top area just gives you a sense of the homes we are currently committed to build within South Hams. So you can see from 2019 through to 2022 and beyond, we currently have 174 homes either complete or on site for affordable rent, 2 for social rent, just over 100 for shared ownership, and some homes for market rent. So in total, our plans from last year for the future are around 349 homes. The second chart just highlights how many homes we're planning to build over the next few years, and you can see that there's something like 13,000 planned over the next few years, and you can also see that this year we would have, as I said previously, built about 1,300 homes, and that's reduced quite significantly because of COVID, and will have a knock-on effect next financial year as well. But over 5 years, we're still planning to build something like 6,200 homes of all tenures, and over 10 years, just over 13,000 homes. One of the questions asked before the meeting was, are we doing any regeneration at the moment? There's nothing currently on site, but we are currently carrying out a feasibility study on Parker's Way in Totnes. So that's the only regeneration project we're currently looking at present. So if we could move on, please, Darryl. And again, please. So customer services. So a number of the questions were around how we allocate homes, what's our approach to service delivery, how are we supporting vulnerable residents, and so on. So what I wanted to do is just spend a bit of time just going through each of these areas. So again, Darryl, if we could move on, please. One of the first questions was around how do we support families who want to move home or where they may wish to stay in villages. And I think it's fair to say that Live West, like South Hams, are a partner of Devon Home Choice, which is the principal way in which all of our vacant and new homes are allocated. And we recognise that there are over 1,200 active applicants within South Hams, so there's a significant level of need. And so primarily, if people wish to move house or access one of our homes, it is through Devon Home Choice. Residents can swap homes via something called mutual exchange, and again that is an application process that we do progress in normal times. We do actually have new applications on hold because of COVID, but existing applications that are being progressed are continuing. And I guess I think it would be fair to say that with high demand and with limited supply of new affordable homes and with relatively low turnover of existing homes, waiting times can vary quite significantly, clearly depending on location, people's needs and the availability of homes as and when they become available. If we could move on, please, Daryl. So in terms of our approach to service delivery, I just thought it'd be helpful to give you a sense of where we are with COVID and the impact that's been having on the organisation. And clearly, since 23rd of March last year, we've been in and out a range of lockdowns. So our approach is very much how can we deliver services safely? And by safely, we mean how do we protect our residents and also how do we protect our colleagues working in the field? And we recognise that we need to adapt. It hasn't always been easy to deliver services. Many residents have been shielding or are rightly concerned about infection rates with the virus, and so we've been having to adapt the way we work. And that has included identifying where we can support customers who are struggling for a range of wellbeing reasons. Our priority, though, has been one of safety and compliance. It's really important through this period that we make sure that gas servicing, boiler servicing, Legionella testing, electrical testing and so on continue to take place, and we just discharge our responsibilities under the relative Health and Safety Acts. What we have done, though, is through every stage of changing our services, we've consulted with residents to get to not only articulate what we want to deliver, but actually seek their views. And we've continued to communicate as and when there have been changes, or when there have been changes in terms of lockdown rules. We've regularly communicated with residents through letters and through social media and on our website to make sure there's a good understanding of what we're doing differently and why we're doing that. So if we could move on, please, Daryl. So this next slide just gives you a summary of what we're currently doing and what we're not. So in essence, everything green on the left we are continuing to do. So whether that's safety checks, we are continuing a full repairs service. I mean, clearly that is something we'll continue to keep under review, but at this moment in time, we are trying to deliver emergency, urgent and routine repairs. And one of the questions that was posed was, why aren't we offering time-limited slots for residents on repairs? And in pre-COVID times, we would very often offer an AM, a PM, or a missing a school run appointment for residents. But clearly with some of the restrictions we've had with COVID, we've had some real challenges in terms of logistically planning repairs. We've had numerous people understandably not wishing to let us in. We've had lots of residents who have been self-isolating or have been shielding. And so to try and be as efficient and as effective as possible, we have been offering a full repair day service, i.e. rather than time slots, really to try and get through as many repairs as possible. And just to give you a sense of the challenge, when we had the first summer lockdown, we actually had something like 9,000 backlog repairs that we had to work through in addition to our normal work in progress. And that took us 3.5 months to deliver. Is a real challenge. So actually, by giving us as much flexibility as possible in terms of the time we can deliver a repair in the day, means that we can get through more repairs than we would ordinarily get through. So you can see on the left, there's a lot we're still doing, whether it's moving homes, selling houses, doing some surveying work, processing existing mutual exchanges and so on. On the right, they are the services that are on hold, and to a large extent have been on hold for much of the last year and this financial year. So new mutual exchanges are on hold, and replacing kitchens and bathrooms are on hold unless there's a desperate or urgent need to replace them. Non-essential home visits, the use of communal spaces, and indeed some of our community development and activity group activity that would normally take place. So if we could move on, please, down to the next slide. Just to give you a sense of when we consult with residents, the feedback. So that's that schedule that I've just shown you. We had a number of focus groups of residents giving feedback. Overall, there was 86% for the support we were taking, and 88% for repairs, and 88% for the support around neighbourhoods and services. I think it would be fair to say that through the consultation and through our engagement, we've had a number of people who have been very clear around concerns around mental health and well-being and loneliness. And so we've been trying to think about how we can support residents over the last year, which takes me on to the next slide, please, Daryl. So this just gives you a sense of what we've been doing. And since the first lockdown at the end of March last year, we've done something like 20,000 welfare calls. And we have a very good database where we identify who are vulnerable and categories of vulnerability. But we've been effectively ringing as many residents as possible, writing to residents and trying to identify who has a vulnerability. And what that's really highlighted across our whole stock is something like 6% of our customers are struggling to cope at the moment. And you can see the bullet points highlight areas where there are concerns. Some of it has been practical around accessing shopping and medication where they're shielding or isolating. And we've made sure that either our staff or community groups have provided an effective link. People have identified loneliness, so we've been providing ongoing reassurance calls. There's obviously been increasing concerns around mental health, anxiety and well-being. And overridingly, what we've seen is many people struggling financially. People have been furloughed, people have lost jobs. And it's been really important that we have had an understanding of that. So not only can we provide support, financial support where needed, but also we can make sure that people's homes aren't at risk. We have a tenancy sustainment team who have something like 50 new referrals every week, and they are there specifically to support our housing staff to ensure that tenancies are sustained and individuals are supported. And in the last 9 months, we've spent just over £200,000 through our Crisis and Hardship Fund, supporting around 1,000 customers, and that's included a donation of around £39,000 to various food banks across the southwest, including £2,000 to food banks within the South Hams area. And in terms of breaking that down into a bit more detail, Daryl, if we can move on to the next slide, please. And it's quite a busy slide, but it just gives you a sense of how much grant has been spent within South Hams, how many customers we've supported. So we've issued about 103 grants. On the left-hand side, you can see that the average grant was about £238, and the top 3 areas of where the grant was spent was food, utilities, white goods, and helping people with social and digital inclusion. We are getting something like 89 referrals every quarter to our tenancy sustainment team. And just further down, just to give you a sense of what's been going on the ground, just over 1,100 customers have had proactive and ongoing welfare calls, and that's been continuing with about half of those on an ongoing basis. You can see that 206 additional customers have been called since November, and there are lots more statistics, but the one I wanted to just point out is the penultimate bullet, which is over 60% of customers who are referred to us or who we speak to from a welfare perspective have highlighted issues around requests for support with finance. The last bullet point really just highlights what many of us already know, which is concerns around mental health and people's incomes tightening because of furlough and job losses, but also increasing home costs, unemployment rates rising, and sadly an increase in domestic violence as well. So that hopefully gives you a kind of an overview of where we are with customers and also how we're supporting many of those from a welfare perspective, and we'll continue to do that for the foreseeable future. Daryl, if we could move on please to the next slide. So a number of you have asked about what's our approach to environment, particularly around SAP or EPC ratings in our homes, and how we are both tackling energy efficiency of homes, but also how we're dealing with trees and rewilding in a number of our communities. So our strategy, which was launched late last year, focuses on 4 principal areas: our homes, whether that's new homes or existing, and our vehicles, both employees and our in-house repairs team, our workplace, and our neighbourhoods. So the next slide, Daryl, if you could move to it, please, really just gives you just a summary, and we're very happy to provide more information because there's lots more going on the ground of what we're doing over the next 2 to 3 years in terms of addressing and implementing our own environmental strategy. So at the top, you will see that our focus from April will be very much where we build new homes to make sure they have an EPC rating of A or a very high B. That's not always in our control. We do buy a number of homes through the Section 106 planning route, where developers don't always adhere to that. But where we're building homes in our control from April, everything will either be B or A rated and high B. Our approach is very much to improve the fabric of our homes in terms of insulation, but supported by bolt-on technologies. So solar panels, photovoltaics, ground source, air source, heat pumps. In terms of how we are going to ensure all our homes are at least EPC C by 2030, we've made a commitment that we have about 8,200 homes that are currently D to G. Our commitment is we want all of those homes to be at least C by 2028, and we've already made provision of about £36 million to ensure that happens. Looking more longer term, the decarbonisation agenda for 2050 is also on our radar, and we've added a further £200 million to our business plan to ensure that as and when new technologies and greater clarity around, for example, when does gas no longer sit on the grid, and when other new technologies roll forward, we will make sure that we've got sufficient provision to ensure that our homes comply. And if we can accelerate that before 2050, then subject to the technologies, that's something we'll do. We're rolling out smart meters to all existing homes and new homes so that residents can be in greater control in understanding how much their homes cost. And where we do remove trees on new development sites, every tree is being replaced on a 2-to-1 basis. In terms of our vehicles, we do something like 5 million business miles per annum throughout the southwest, and we've got a commitment that there's a 10% year-on-year reduction on that. And we've recently introduced an electric car scheme for all staff, where staff are required to have vehicles to carry out their roles within Live West. In terms of our neighbourhoods, we've last year introduced within the organisation a renewable technology team, and that team is very much dedicated to not only service the new technologies that are coming online, and we have something like 4,000 homes now with either photovoltaics, solar panels, ground source, air source, heat pumps, but also that team are there to support residents in terms of their knowledge and understanding. And we've done tree surveys, so we have a really good understanding of the carbon capture of our trees that we own, and also what the long-term capture is. We will be introducing rewilding schemes, and I think on 1 or 2 schemes we're asking about what our approach to green spaces in estates. We're very much where we can. We're looking towards introducing green spaces and rewilding spaces, both in existing green spaces, but also in new developments as well. And in terms of our workplace, we have 3 main offices, all relatively new. They all either have air source heating, district heating, or PV panels. Our approach is very much around zero waste, nothing to landfill, no single-use plastics, and we've got targets around that, and also paper reduction. And all of our 3 main offices are now on green electricity as well, as at the end of last year. So Darryl, if we could move on, please. Looking within our homes in South Hams, a number of questions asked about what the rating is of our homes. So the chart in front of you identifies that about a third of our homes are currently EPC D or below. And the box below that highlights that we estimate that it's going to, and we've made provision for this within our business plan, that over the next 5 to 7 years, depending on whether gas is still on the grid or not, we think it will be something like £5.5 million to upgrade to very efficient boilers, or if gas isn't available and we move to different technologies, for example, renewable heat sources, then we estimate it's going to be something like 7.5 million. And if we can move to gas, then we think there's about 73 homes that will require investment of over £10,000 to achieve EPCC. and without gas, that's going to be a higher number, probably something in the order of about 428 homes. And one or two questions have been around stock disposal, and I think as we start to work through this in a post-COVID world in terms of surveys and understanding in greater detail the total investment within our homes, I think we'll have a better understanding of the total investment in homes, in not just the energy investment, and that will then determine whether it's cost efficient to invest or whether we look towards disposing of those homes over a period of time. And you may be aware that we meet regularly with Councillor Judy Pearce. It's one of those conversations we've been having, and our commitment is that as and when we have a known pipeline of disposals, we'll communicate that to you so that you know not only what we're looking towards disposing over in any one year, but also the rationale for that. If we could just move to the next slide, please, Darryl. So there are a couple of questions around rent, understandably, in the COVID world. So the chart at the top shows, the top three lines show how the housing sector performs in terms of rent arrears. So the lowest quartile in terms of performance is just over 3.5%. The medium quartile is about 3%, and upper quartile performance is about 2.2%. And the yellow line below all of those is how Live West is performing in terms of rent collection within our homes in South Hams. So you can see we've got very good upper quartile performance and beyond in terms of rent collection, which is great, and a real testimony to both our customers and their commitment to pay rent in difficult times, but also to our staff in working with customers. Just to give you a sense of, since last March, how many new claimants for universal credit, there have been 311. We have suspended all evictions. We'd suspended anyway, but you'll be aware that MHCLG have issued direction that evictions are suspended until at least February the 21st. And there are new rules around people taking court action and so on based on the length of arrears that have taken place. And just to give you a sense of what's going on, we've had no rent arrears evictions in South Hams in the last year. We do have 6 cases we're actively working with customers who are failing to engage with us, and clearly our focus will be trying to support them as much as we can, ensure that they're entitled to claim all the benefits they can, but ultimately working with them so their home is not at risk. And then if we could go to the next slide, which is, you'll be pleased to know, my last slide. A number of you asked, how do you get contact or know who to speak to in Live West, or who the housing officer is? So on this slide, I've given the web address. On our website, we have a lookup where anyone can find out who the housing officer is just by going to that link, typing in the postcode, and it will tell you who the housing officer is. But in addition, I've included both the names and the email addresses of the area manager, the regional manager, the exec director of operations that covers all maintenance, asset investment and housing, and myself. And this presentation, Councillor Birch, is very happy for this to be available for members as well. So next slide, please. And I think that takes me to the end. So over to you and questions.
Right, Mr. Crawford, Mr. Crawford, thank you very much indeed. That's most informative, and thank you very much indeed for addressing most of the questions that were sent to you in advance. So I'll open the meeting up for questions from members. So could members please indicate in the chat box as to whether or not they wish to put a question to Mr. Crawford. Mike. Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Crawford. That was a really interesting presentation. Could I ask you a question, if I may, please, as a follow-up on the supporting vulnerable customers slide, the 6% not coping slide, where there was a sub-bullet about access to shopping and medication being one of the requirements, and you made reference to linking them with community groups. Could you give me a little bit more information about that, please? I'm just thinking about community groups within the South Hams and how they might know about these people, or how these people might be signposted to them so that they could support them within their own communities.
Mr. Crawford, you're muted.
Yeah, sorry, I'm afraid I can't give you in specifics in terms of South Hams. I've not got that information to hand. I'm very happy to do that after the meeting if that would help. But what we have tried to do is that there have been a number of charities in key locations, food banks and so on. If people have been struggling, what we have tried to do is not only use our own staff. So, for example, in the first lockdown, there were a number of residents who were shielding or who were very concerned about infection, and a number of our maintenance staff were actually going out and instead of carrying out repairs, because the repairs had dropped off at that time, we're actually carrying out errands, shopping errands and so on. So what we have done is, where those residents, so I think there are 1,100 in South Hams, and there are an ongoing about 500, where a number of those do have shopping or medication requirements, they have been supported either directly through our own colleagues or through others, neighbours or groups. But I'm very happy to try and find out who in South Hams is there, and if that's helpful for you to communicate more broadly, then that's great.
Thank you. It was only in general terms, and I was thinking in the sense that if members were to liaise with their local housing support officers, I mean, there are across South Hams, and I'm sure across the whole of the Live West housing stock area, there are going to be community groups that are existing solely for this purpose, and it just strikes me it would be very useful if there was some sort of contact between them. Yeah, no, that would be great. Actually, that would be great. So I don't know who would be best placed within the council to liaise directly with us on that, but if that's something we can pick up offline, that would be great.
Thank you. Councillor Powell.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick one. In passing, I'd like to say I'm very pleased to see the efforts being made to address the carbon decarbonisation programme. I think that's excellent work, and I'm very pleased to see that. I'm just delighted to see that you're happy for us to approach people like your area manager. I've been doing that recently and built up quite a good relationship. I presume we don't have councillor representatives on the board anymore. Is that right?
So the only time there was councillor representation was when Tor Homes existed as an entity back in well, I think Tor Homes stopped existing as an entity in 2012. So
yeah, so would the area manager be the appropriate level to go?
Absolutely, or the housing officer or the area manager, and obviously, as I've said previously, if my contact details, the housing director, exec director for operations, their details are there. So I think if at any point you're finding there are some challenges in terms of issues, then we're very happy to hear from you.
Yeah, and obviously, as councillors, we're in a bit of a sort of dichotomy there, because we're not your tenants' representatives, but we find ourselves at times in a representative role. Is that one you're happy for us to adopt in that way?
It is, Councillor Panner. I mean, I would say first and foremost, I think it's important that residents, if they can, engage with the housing officer. I mean, increasingly, and I'm sure you can appreciate this, what we're finding is that people's stress, resilience, anxiety through what has been a difficult 10 months is diminishing, and we are seeing, understandably, people being quite concerned about the future. Some individuals, understandably, are finding it difficult in their circumstances, and are understandably trying to accelerate their complaints or their issues, both within Live West, but also with the likes of MPs and councillors. I think in the first instance, what I would certainly encourage you to do is ask the resident to liaise directly with Live West staff, and really, if only then are they not getting any traction, or particularly if they're not being responded to effectively, then please, by all means, take up the cause and engage with the colleagues, or if need be, accelerate that within the organisation. We're very happy to hear where things are going well, but also where things aren't going well.
No, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Councillor Sweet.
Hi, thank you.
Hi.
Just put my camera on so you can see a little glimpse of my nice Live West home in the background. Daryl, can I have a question for you? Could you actually put up the questions that were submitted by members on the screen, just so that's because we had that sent through by email, so it'd be helpful if they could be there to sort of refer to. Yeah, thank you for your presentation. It's really, really helpful, and some of the questions I think have been sort of answered. a little bit more fully than others, so that's why I put that up there.
Yes,
I've
sure.
scribbled down a few more questions as I went along. You mentioned the sort of 91% customer satisfaction.
Yes, it's 90%. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, what is the sort of process for capturing that? Because I've been a Live West tenant. I was a Tor Homes tenant and then DCH. And when we had a repair carried out, they would leave a little questionnaire, paper questionnaire that was collected or you could send in. And then I think there was emails after a visit or a phone call. I wouldn't know what the process is for responding without sort of going into the website and looking specifically. So we capture feedback in a number of ways. I think the feedback you're referring to, Councillor Sweet, is what I describe as informal feedback. We don't use that information for calculating satisfaction. So satisfaction is calculated on a rolling monthly basis. So every month, independently, customers are randomly telephoned to get and asked a series of questions. And the reason for doing that is to ensure that the methodology is sound, is consistent, and that we can get some real sort of validity to the information we're receiving. So there's a rolling programme on a monthly basis of customers across our homes from Bristol down to the Isles of Scilly that are randomly contacted. The methodology is such that the numbers mean that statistically it's an incredibly strong, reliable figure, and that's a figure that we report both to MHCLG and indeed annually through our accounts. Okay, thank you. I have written down how far along are you with the sort of rewilding? I think because you mentioned sort of quite strong figures about, you know, getting the houses up to EPC, but actually about the sort of outdoor spaces and more specifically, I think about grounds maintenance.
Yeah. So what I highlight is kind of our plans and our strategy over the next 3 to 5 years. I think it'd be fair to say that understandably our biggest focus has been. I mean, you think the energy agenda and the environmental agenda is huge. Our focus has been very much making sure that the new homes we built are to a very high standard. That's had to be where we focused our energy, alongside understanding both where our homes don't meet EPC C, why they don't, and the level of investment that we're going to have to identify. So I think it'd be fair to say that the information I provided, then we have far more information around our plans around both new homes and investing in the existing homes, because that's where both the single biggest cost is, but it's also the single biggest benefit to our residents. Anything we can do to make sure their homes are affordable from a warmth perspective, and also it's good for the environment has been a priority. And new developments coming online, all new developments now, there's a focus on understanding green spaces and where there's an opportunity to enhance those, including rewilding. And we will, post-COVID, then start a programme of understanding where rewilding could take place and what the priorities will be. But I'm afraid we haven't made any progress on existing schemes on rewilding. That's very much something for the future once we've come out of a COVID world.
Thank you. I did mention in the previous, in my question about, you know, just investigating how, you know, communities really, and the opportunities that involving communities, probably in existing builds, older builds, and in the future, of, you know, working on sort of more communal gardens, community garden projects, and, you know, really strengthening that community basis, because that, you know, that's something that hasn't really sort of shone through.
No, and to be candid with you, in the last 10 months, we've done no community work because it, you know, in a COVID world, it just hasn't been a priority. You know, we've very much had to focus on redirecting our staff resource away from some of the added value work around communities and very much into welfare support. So, for example, maintaining a repair service, a focus on health and safety, and making sure we're resourced to support you know, a number of residents around ongoing welfare calls has been where we've had to redirect our staffing resource, because that's been what's been important to our customers.
Okay, Councillor Sweet, can I move on to the next question?
Yeah, yes, of course.
Yes, okay. Councillor Brazil.
Yeah, thank you, John. Yeah, a couple of questions. I mean, you talked about staff resources there. Could I ask what was the pay increase for staff over the last year, or this year?
So I think last year it was 2.2% average, but in addition to that, in the previous year, we did what was called a reward exercise and a harmonisation exercise, and there were a range of staff increases based on. So our reward strategy, Council Brazil, is one of market medium, and we apply that whether it's my role or indeed every role within the organisation, and where that's externally verified and where there are any shortfalls, then all of our colleagues, regardless of where they are in the organisation, we have been moving people up to market medium. So where they've fallen short of market medium, then they've seen a larger increase.
Thank you. No, well, thank you. No, I asked that because I see in the financial reports that your pay was increased by 10%. I just wonder why there's such a disparity between the staff and the executives.
Well, as I just explained, Councillor Brazil, there isn't a disparity. My role, along with directors and all managers and all staff within the organisation, the salaries have been benchmarked against market medium externally, and where they fall short of market medium, which has included mine, there has been an uplift to reflect that. So we've done that exercise. In addition, we have ensured that our salaries keep pace with inflation, which is what we've done. So my increase reflects both an inflationary element and also a recognition that my salary was falling short of market median.
Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Hi there.
Hi.
I'd just like to know what are your present policies regarding voids, and also do you use your own building inspectors on new developments, and are they checking the quality of the build, etc.?
Yeah. So could I just ask, when you say what's our policy on voids, Councillor Kemp, is there a specific issue you want me to pick up in terms of voids? Is it standards or our approach to letting? Which element of it?
Yeah, when you have a new tenant moving into a property, do the tenants have a choice of, if the previous tenant has left behind white goods or carpets or etc., is it still your policy to sort of rip everything out, or if things are in a good condition, then can it be a choice of the new tenant to request that they're left behind?
I think it would be fair to say in the vast majority of cases, items are removed. So, for example, electrical goods are quite often removed because we have concerns about PAT testing and the electrical safety of those appliances, and understandably, where carpets are in place, in some instances they remain, but it's a really difficult judgment, because what one individual might think is acceptable, someone might think is completely unacceptable. So there is a judgment taken where the condition may not be great and the items are invariably removed for those reasons. And it's a real challenge, actually. What we do try and do, though, is where items have been removed and residents are clearly have some financial challenges, and then that's where our crisis and hardship fund is there to help them, whether that's furniture or carpeting if need be, or indeed, as you can see from our crisis fund, supporting people with white goods, and that's something we've done previously and will continue to do.
Thank you.
Right, thank you.
Mr. Crawford, there aren't any further questions in our chat box. I don't know whether you want to say a final word before we thank you for your presentation and for answering the questions. I'll leave you to make any closing comments if you wish.
Well, thank you, Councillor Birch. I mean, thank you for your time today. I mean, I think what I would say on reflection, and perhaps looking back at this COVID and us dealing with COVID and the challenge it's facing both our customers and indeed our colleagues in delivering in very uncertain times is hugely challenging. And I think that, I think we absolutely recognise that our customers have been hugely supportive and very empathetic in terms of the position we've been faced in trying to deliver services in really exceptional times. And I would say on record that my 1,400 colleagues working for the organisation have done a tremendous job as well, because like everyone else, they've got issues going on at home, they've got sicknesses. We've had numerous members of staff with COVID isolating, and they've obviously got challenges with their own personal circumstances, whether that's bereavements in families or indeed child schooling, etc. This is incredibly exceptional times, and I just want to place on record that our thanks to both our customers but also our colleagues in supporting our residents within these exceptional times is something we recognise and really value.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Sweet, you say you have a question. Can it be a short and quick question, please?
Yes, it is. It is quick. But I just wanted to say thank you, again for the presentation, and just thanks to the whole team at Live West. We're all sort of struggling, aren't we, and facing all the all the issues that come up at this unprecedented time. Can I just ask you quickly, how would one find out the EPC of one's home?
So if you speak to your housing officer, they should be able to either tell you or find someone who can tell you. So by all means, if that's, and we're rolling out a new IT system probably from July onwards. The aim for that, the reason for investing, I think it's about £4 million in that system, is so that we can move much of this information online, so residents can actually go online and actually identify not only their EPC but also the investment plans and timescales for their homes as well. We want to make this as interactive as possible.
Thanks. That's great. I mean, actually having that potential for a resident's profile in there somewhere would be great, where that sort of who's working, who's at home at what times, that all of that could be maybe incorporated, so it's a real two-way.
Absolutely. We'll certainly. Sorry.
Thanks. Cool. Thank you very much.
Okay. Councillor Kemp, you say you missed the answer to your second question. What was your second question?
I was asking if Live West actually have their own building inspectors on new developments, and whether they're checking the quality of the build throughout the build, and also as a sub question to that, do they have an influence over the proportions of properties, i.e. the size of rooms, etc.?
Okay, so in terms of the first question, yes, we do. We have our own in-house clerk of works team. We also employ external clerk of works as well. And I think it'd be fair to say that over the last few years, there have been various reports around varying standards of build. So we have effectively in the last couple of years strengthened our own team to make sure that the quality of the homes that we're buying or building are to standards, particularly around fire safety and fire barriers and as-built construction. In terms of your second question, sorry, can you just remind me the second point?
Well, it was about the sort of the room proportions and
So where we build homes in our own right, I think it would be fair to say we tend to build those to a larger space standard. Where we acquire homes through developers through Section 106, we have almost no control over that, and obviously that's really a matter for the planning authority in terms of demand and size of homes. But we have obviously national space standards, but we tend to build our existing homes we're in control of to a higher standard.
All right, lovely. Thank you very much.
Mr. Crawford, thank you very much indeed. It was most informative, and thank you for addressing the questions. Presumably you've given us the contact details at the end of your presentation, and presumably it is members are invited to make contact as and when necessary. So I would ask Darryl if the presentation slides can be distributed to members. And once again, Mr. Crawford, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Well. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye. Right, if right, item 9 is the waste contract performance. There is a report. I'll ask Councillor Baldry to introduce the report and then introduce Mr. Molyneux and FCC.
Thank you, Chairman, very much. The report, I hope, speaks for itself. I'm introducing it. I'm not going to move the recommendation at the moment because I suspect that as the meeting progresses, it is a fairly bland recommendation. I think there may be amendments, so I shall leave the recommendation as it is. As you say, Mr. Are you there?
Yes, yes.
Sure. As you say, we have FCC representatives. I see Mark Barnfield and Brian Ashby are both here. There may be others, and Steve Molyneux and Jane Savage are with us. As the report outlines, the round changes did not work well everywhere. They were a lot of repeat failures, which I find very irritating. But across the district as a whole, I think they were largely successful. We were due to be introducing the round changes in September, and coinciding with that, the changes to introduce the Devon Line service. Thank goodness we weren't able to do so, because I think it would have been, thank goodness in the sense that it would have been pretty difficult to bring the round changes in at the same time with the number of mistakes which were made with introducing the round changes. On the negative side, of course, by not introducing the Devon Line service in September, there was a financial problem from doing that for the district. You will see in the report that we're going to get a detailed implementation plan tomorrow from FCC. It's due tomorrow on how we're going to make the changes with the Devon Line services. I think we're going down the right path, that we will do it. The Devon Line services will be introduced from about the 8th of March, round by round, and once one round is successfully introduced, we will then be able to move on to changes above and beyond that. I'll now hand over to Mr. Molyneux and from him to FCC, because I'm sure there will be questions from members.
Mr. Molyneux.
Thank you, Chair. I don't really want to add anything to what Councillor Baldry said. I'd just like to introduce Mark Barnfield and Brian Ashby. Mark is the responsible for waste collection services for FCC across the country, and Brian is the senior regional manager responsible for the contract in South Hams. They've got a presentation to go through that talks through some of the issues FCC encountered and what FCC have done about that, and that links then into their plan and proposal for the next step. So I will say nothing else at this point, but ask Mark and Brian. And I noticed that Councillor Austin has asked a question. We're going to do questions at the end, are we, Chair?
Yeah, I will just, first of all, I was going to make the point that please, members, can we leave all the questions until the end of the presentation? But I see Councillor Austin's got in the chat box a question. Councillor Austin.
I can ask the question at the end of the presentation, Chairman. I have got a question, but I can take it any time, really.
Can you? So is it okay for you to wait until the end of the presentation?
Yeah, fine. Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Chairman, can I just, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this, but I mean, there's probably going to be a lot of questions. As a panel, do we need to deal with panel members first?
Yes, that's what I was going to do. Is right. That
okay? Thank you.
At the end of the presentation, I will ask panel members if they have a question. It will then be non-panel members and then members of the executive. So I'll take them in that order, but that will be at the end of the presentation.
Okay, thanks.
One last point, Chair, if I may. I mean, in terms of member questions, I think it's important that we focus on the bigger picture rather than an individual bin issue, because it's not particularly fair on FCC to expect them to know the answers on individual issues. So I think members need to focus on the bigger context and the impact on the wider members of the public. So,
okay, thank you. So I'll hand over to FCC and if you'd like to commence your presentation, please.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. Mark Barn. Yeah. And thank you, Councillor Baldry for the summary. So thank you also members for inviting us to talk today about the contract performance and more particularly around the issues following the round changes which commenced last October. What we were intending to do with this presentation, and as you've alluded to, I'm sure there are plenty of questions afterwards, is go through a process of explaining what was needed in the first place, look at some of the issues that were caused, and we accept the heightened and lengthened number of missed bins and repeat misses and so on. Some of the issues with following a bit of a lessons learned review within FCC as to why some of those issues occurred. Some other mitigating factors, one of which I'm sure you're more than familiar with because we're currently living through the COVID-19 pandemic. What we've done about it as a business and continue to do about it, and what we're going to do going forward as we move into the Devon Aligned service. But we acknowledge up front the frustration that some of your residents and certainly some of you as members have experienced in terms of perhaps the complaints you've had to deal with as a result of some of the disruption. As Steve kindly introduced me, I'm head of the collections and street scene business for FCC in the UK, and Brian, who I'm hoping is on the call as well, who will be assisting me in responding to some of your queries, is the area manager and has a portfolio of contracts, one of which is South Ham, so has a little bit more of the day-to-day experience and knowledge with regards to some of the disruption that you've experienced. Daryl, if you, I don't know whether it's possible just to expand the slides a bit. I think on the previous presentation they looked a little bit larger on screen. Thank you. That's great. So if you're able, Daryl, if we can move on to the first proper slide, that'd be great. Right, thank you. To going back and just to put into context why the reroute was needed on the back of what was a service that was running well, or certainly in line with performance expectations prior to the reroute. Clearly, you have the new Devon Aligned service coming in. For various reasons, that's been delayed, and as Councillor Baldry has kindly reaffirmed, that will be in a phased approach starting in March this year. The reroute is necessary to prepare for the Devon Aligned service. It's in order to shape the rounds, which have to change as a result of the new system, which is going to a weekly recycling collection. And as I say, as Councillor Baldry acknowledged, doing that change on the back of the acknowledged and understood disruption at the same time as changing the round would have exacerbated some of the issues that you've experienced. So it was a necessary thing to do in order to prepare for service change. Another thing and another justification and reason for a round change is route optimization. As rounds develop over time, new properties are built, collection rounds get a little bit imbalanced, and at some point in time they need to be changed, and date change needs to occur to balance those rounds off. So again, another reason for that situation. Another essential reason that it was necessary to do the round changes is that when we have to align the crews to service options, and by that I mean, with the service and the way the rounds were done before, you would have a crew that would do your residual waste one week, and they would do the same rounds the following week for recycling. In order to deliver the new service, we had to split that up essentially and assign crews to a service. So moving forward, crews will be responsible for residual waste collections only and recycling collections only, and that is in order to enable the new service to come in. And further to that, we've also aligned services with the two operating depots. Obviously, you've got Tor Quarry and Ivy Bridge. The transfer station for the new recycled materials that will be collected when the service comes in is Ivy Bridge. So essentially the disposal point or the transfer point before the material is sold and value recovered from it. the most efficient way from a service perspective of delivering that service to get the maximum out of the crews and the service in terms of productivity is your tip point being your start and finish point. So essentially all the recycling services are run from Ivy Bridge, and in order to do the reroute, that workforce change in terms of the rounds was a necessary thing to do. Thank you, Darryl. If we could move on to the next slide. Right, so, and I'm sure, and we've seen both Brian and myself and the contract team, and in conversations with Steve and Jane, your officers, we've experienced a whole range of issues, but we're looking to summarise those in a sort of broader terms. I'm sure in terms of categorising your own experiences, you'll see where you fit. But the first point I'd like to make with a round change, there will be a round change or a reroute. There will be always, no matter where you do this, there will be increased levels of disruption. And I think the report that you've got acknowledges that. However, and the other point we would make, the delivery model that was used to deliver the round change in South Hams is something that has been delivered elsewhere successfully. So we weren't doing anything that was off market or that was unproven. It was a proven way of doing this kind of change. What became apparent after a few weeks of the change, accepting that there will always be disruption, there will always be increased numbers of incomplete rounds, and I think if you look at the graph, failed collections is the term used, but all as well as increased numbers of missed bins, accepting that missed bins, even in normal service operations and standards, will occur on a waste collection contract. But the delivery, you know, the levels of disruption that we experienced in your district were and have persisted for longer than would be normally expected, and we acknowledge that. There was a higher than normal missed bin rate for longer. There was a rounds not completing persisted for longer. So normally you would expect the rounds to be new, some of the knowledge to be lost, which is a necessary bit of pain that you have to go through with these things, but that bedding in was taking longer. And the repeat misses, and I know some of you will have examples of that, and perhaps personal examples of that, where we repeat or we miss, and then that is fed through the missed bin reporting system, and same thing happens on the next cycle. We acknowledge those things have happened. We don't want to see that happen. We know you don't want to see that happen. But as the sort of the contractor that you have appointed, that we are working in partnership to deliver your service, we have to find a way to resolve those things. I haven't got control of this presentation, and I was going to use my cursor, but if I could, referring to the failed collection, so the graph that you can see it's not what would be the normal measure of a missed bin rate. It's the failed collections or the incomplete rounds, essentially. So the parameter on the left is the number of properties, but what you will see is from the 4th of October, which is essentially when the round change commenced, up until a peak of around, I think it's, looking at this, the graph, it's just the beginning of November. So there's a peak sort of, I don't know, just before halfway across the chart. That is at the point, and we'll talk about some of the things we did in agreement and collaboration with the officers. We had to deploy, even though we had extra resource in, we had to deploy additional round resource to rectify the misses, complete the rounds, and ensure better completion. And what you will see essentially is pretty much at the beginning of November, from an incomplete rounds perspective, a fairly significant drop because of the additional resource deployed, moving along to what you will see as a spike on the 30th of November. And I'm sure you are also aware that around that period of time, we had a COVID self-isolation incident in our Ivy Bridge depot, which negated 28 members of staff had to go into self-isolation as a result of that, which is essentially half our collections workforce in South Hams. So whilst the normal missed bin reporting was suspended during that period of time, in terms of incomplete rounds, we're still monitoring that. So in order to continue delivering services, and as you will be aware, a lot of authorities would typically reduce service. We said we will continue delivering. There was the fact that we're using a high proportion of agency staff. Some of that learned knowledge and improvement was lost for a period of about 10 days when we had to have agency cover in. So there was a heightened level of incompletes during that period. And once our staff returned following self-isolation, that incomplete round element seemed to flatten out. And the odd bump there where we don't complete would be as a result perhaps of a vehicle failure or puncture where a crew can't complete. But certainly in terms of the initial shock, that has been addressed with that additional resource put in. But we acknowledge the issues. We acknowledge the frustration that you as members will have experienced in terms of resident feedback, and that's not a position we want you to be in, and it's not a position we want to be in having terms how to receive that. When we do, we want to be in a position to be able to deal with it. Thank you. That if we can move on, Darryl. Thank you. So in looking at what has happened and some of the reasons why we had that heightened and prolonged disruption, we took the opportunity by way of wanting to understand ourselves in order to be able to rectify the problems and be able to explain to yourselves as our customer and your residents, what is it that didn't work from our point of view? What is it that as a business we could have done slightly differently or better, bearing in mind that the delivery model that was adopted to implement this round change was something that had worked elsewhere. So both myself, Brian, and director for the operational business in the UK, work closely with both your officers and the contract team to try and understand what it was that didn't quite work. So with these sort of changes, what you will always have is additional resource and additional fleet to support any issues, because you're not going to avoid issues. And I think I've probably made that point several times. However, as the first 2, 3, 4 weeks rolled on, it became more apparent that the actual bedding in and downward curve of issues wasn't going downward. It was maintaining at the same sort of level. So what became apparent and what was clear, and hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? We needed more fleet capacity in there to support that initial and manage it down. It wouldn't be, typical in a normal situation, but we found ourselves in an extraordinary situation here. From the look back, what was also clear, and bearing in mind that the designing of the rounds and the engagement has been done through the COVID period, we accept that there needs to be, or should have been, more detailed. It's not to say we didn't do any, but more detailed local engagement on the round changes with the contract team and with the crews to understand and get input and insight in a more detailed fashion on the nature of some of those rounds. So that is an acceptance. We had, and we touch a bit on the bottom of this slide, a range of IT issues that didn't help our situation. But one of those, if I can liken it to a sat nav, we in refuse collection contracts and in South Hams, you have in-cab hardware and software, which is essentially an iPad mounted that details round progress and so on and so forth. It's essentially a sophisticated sat nav for waste collections. It wasn't apparent prior to, and it was only when the feedback from the crews came in as the issues maintained at high level, the mapping feature on that in-cab wasn't working properly, which was, bearing in mind these routes were relatively new for most of these crews. It was obviously clearly a problem in terms of completing rounds and knowing the patch and learning the patch if that software, which is meant to lead and support, wasn't working properly, but that has now been resolved. We acknowledge in some of the repeat misses, some of the local knowledge is always going to be lost when you do a round change, particularly the way we've had to do it to prepare ourselves for the Devon Aligned service going on. I mean, this was, as we've said before, a necessity to align to service cycle. So what you will find is there was almost a conditioned reflex with some crews, and this will go back to the days when South Hams were operating as a direct service right through to ourselves. Some of those guys will have been on those rounds for a long period of time and will know some of the geographical nuances and detail. Clearly, when you do a change and you align a crew to a service and they're not doing the same round every single week, some of that knowledge is going to be lost. So what hadn't been captured previously and wasn't known to ourselves as a contractor, some of that is lost and it needs to be learnt again, essentially. And going forward, it will settle and that will be captured and that will become, I guess, more automated so somebody can replace. But it was necessary to do. You might challenge, and we have had the question before from some members and the officers, why could you not keep somebody who knew that area or that round on the new rounds? If you think about the situation we're operating in now with COVID, we have to, insofar as possible, crews have to operate in safe working bubbles, so essentially the same crew every day. In order to have that knowledge, you would have to have the crews changing and mixing every single day, which from a COVID safe operating point of view is, as I'm sure you would appreciate, clearly not sensible, not an excuse, but we accept some of that local knowledge was lost, and perhaps some of that local knowledge was more extensive, as in embedded in crews' minds than we had appreciated prior to the round change. What we've also had to do during this is deploy additional supervisory support from other contracts. Now, what we couldn't do was go too far afield because of COVID, but we did get supervisory support from adjoining contracts, which wouldn't be surprised to you that we used some supervisors from West Devon on the back of the fact that some of our South Hams supervisors were less involved and coming back from fairly long periods of absence on phase return. So we acknowledge that the supervisory element needs to chase some of these issues through a bit quicker, and because of these reasons we didn't have that. There were some other IT related issues. We've mentioned the mapping feature, some of the assisted collection information with regards to information uploads created quite a bit of noise. There's a software glitch with some of the job confirmation, so where we've had a missed collection one week and we put it on the system to be reconfirmed the following week, that hadn't there was a glitch in the software, and separately some mobile data. Now, these aren't excuses, these are genuine reasons as to why this didn't work, and some of this is learnt and won't happen going forward. We understand it here, we understand it in South Hams, and talking about the Devon Line service going forward, and we'll talk about what actions we've taken. These sort of things that have occurred shouldn't happen again. Thank you, Darryl. If you can move forward, that'd be great. Other factors to consider, which to an extent are beyond our control, and again, by no way an excuse, but just further context for what we've had to do and what we've tried to do in pretty exceptional circumstances as a nation. It is noted, and there's a couple of press snapshots to the right-hand side. COVID-19 has increased pressure on environmental services across the nation. We've experienced that in South Hams as well, in normal circumstance, and when you're trying to do a round change, we now know that hasn't helped. The reason that the pressures, obviously we have a workforce to get out every day, but as you will know, more people are working from home, and this has significantly increased waste volumes, particularly recyclate volumes. In some instances, and we're seeing this on sites, and volumes up to 14-15% is not unusual on some contracts. As a result of this, waste crews are having to collect higher volumes of waste, often more than services were originally designed to manage. So if you can imagine, more volume means more tips, less productive time when you go into the tip because you're not collecting, additional overtime, and what we would term in the industry as increased participation in capture. Services are designed usually for a certain amount of participation, a certain amount of waste capture. If they go up, it puts stress on the system. This isn't an issue that you've caused, it's not an issue we've caused, it's a fact that volumes have gone up as a result of COVID. The other thing, and this is, we were talking through this, with more people being at home and some of the geography in all areas really, not just South Hams, more cars at home, and it's not in every round, means that some routes can't be completed. So if cars are blocking routes or parked outside and a large RCV or refuse collection vehicle, sorry, can't get down a particular road, it has to go away and come back again, which is clearly inefficient. We will obviously come back, but that is another factor that layers up and causes issues on occasion. Another point we would make is whilst we're, in terms of when you have these sort of changes and you're doing debriefs at the end of the day, where you're trying to learn where things might not have gone as well as you wanted to do, the ability to debrief effectively in a depot in a COVID environment is not as simple as it would have been before. So again, a challenge brought about by the horrific pandemic that we find ourselves in. We mentioned, and we saw that spike in terms of missed or failed collections around the back end of November through to the 8th of December with the self-isolation incident, because a member of our workforce who was integral for COVID, which meant in liaison both with your officers and environmental health officers and public health Devon, that incident made essentially wiped out half our workforce on a Friday, with a view to trying to recover and deliver services the following week was quite a challenge. Again, it's just right in the middle, where if you looked at the incomplete collections, we'd actually push that down. It's not to say at that point in time there weren't any issues with some repeat misses and some of the other issues that we've spoken about on this, I'm sure you'll ask us about. You can imagine not only our frustration and concern for our workforce, but the frustration that we felt like we were making progress. And then we had essentially a 10-day period where that learned behaviour kind of disappeared, and then we didn't start again because the lessons learned and the factors we put in place had commenced shortly after when our workforce came back. But again, a challenge for us in what has been a period of, as I say, heightened disruption. Obviously, the contract team managed to get that agency staff in, which I think is testament to them. And just one other point, that there are still some data discrepancies in terms of data that we have to be able to deliver the contract, which over the coming days and weeks, as we move forward, we'll resolve. Thank you, Dal. If we can move on to the next slide. So what action have we taken as a result of this? And we've touched upon some of this, I think, in the previous slide. We deployed additional rounds on refuse and recycling at the point, I think, you'll see the drop from, I think it's the 2nd of November. We deployed additional rounds to do essentially mop-up rounds for those misses and incompletes until, as I say, the service and the knowledge embedded. Those rounds are still out, and we'll keep those rounds out for as long as we need to ensure that the service progresses in the direction that we want. And what you'll see is a fairly sharp drop. And the graph on the right-hand side is not your incompletes. This is your reported misses. So this is your, on a daily basis, your normal level. And as you guys would know, it's not the number of daily collections, but the number of properties in South Hams, for context, is circa 46,000 or just under. The IT issues that became apparent and weren't apparent prior to the round changes have been resolved. We've ensured that, and it was necessary for that to happen for us to be able to not only monitor the progress and manage the progress, but going forward and mitigate any challenges that would have. We've also identified, and particularly with the miss bins and the repeat misses, and there are a number of reasons for that, we've identified from elsewhere in our business an additional resource to come down to South Hams and manage through on the system. So they've been trained up on another contract in order to not distract from the service in South Hams. the white space system, which essentially monitors the rounds and the management information, and where you've had a repeat miss, or whether it's a miss last week or it's whatever, this particular person will be chasing those through. It will be their responsibility to ensure that they get rectified quickly. If they repeat, understand why they're repeating more specifically, and we are doing that anyway, but it will be a dedicated role to manage that through for as long as it's needed to the satisfaction of yourselves as an authority. We have, in terms of the additional rounds, we've also hired in additional refuse collection vehicles to support. And what has happened as a result of this, because I remember being on a call early October following a report that I think initially, whilst the disruption was a known at the time, it hadn't repeated, and so on. I think we were feeling that progress was on track. Sorry, I can go back. But what this has done is, as I think it was alluded to, it's the issues have meant that we have engaged more so with some members in some instances, and your offices at a more senior level on a more regular basis in order to manage this through. So thank you to, again, Jane, Steve and team for supporting us through this. Through that engagement, obviously, and the focus on the contract at a local level has been increased scrutiny from the likes of Brian, and I know Brian's been on daily calls and sometimes more than that, increased scrutiny from me and increased scrutiny from the rest of the business, which has heightened the focus in the recovery plan to ensure that you get the service back to normal performance levels. Sorry, if we can move on. So with that learning and that acceptance of some of the issues that were within our control that we now need to learn from and move forward, and as I've alluded to, there were a number of issues that were beyond our control and added pressure to the service. We have implemented a lot of those changes, and hopefully we're starting to see the benefit of those in terms of the service now, accepting there will be the anomalies that still materialise. But what's happening with the Devon Line service, which commences in March, is that the accountability for the route and round planning will sit under Brian, who is now the area manager for the contract, who's extraordinarily experienced in these things and is I think probably fair to say an asset for me certainly, and hopefully for you guys going forward. That ownership and accountability will ensure that some of the issues we experienced in the planning last time won't happen again. I would also emphasise that because the round changes have happened on a fairly significant scale from October, the balance of those rounds and day changes aren't happening again. It was done in part to prepare for the new recycling service. So the zones that the new service will be matched to are already set. So the actual planning and the potential disruption will be a lot less as a result of the little bit of pain that we've had to experience so far. What we will do is the walk orders, which is essentially the route order of a collection round, will get more detailed crew input prior to the implementation and unloading onto the systems. The phasing that you as an authority have agreed to will also allow, as we're doing that on a round by round basis, to have detailed scrutiny on any tweaks that need to be made following a particular phase. So that focused supervision and management on a round rather than the whole district at once should enable that to be managed more effectively. More focused supervision and dedicated resource. We've alluded to the chap that's coming down to work on that dedicated function on your contract. I think he will be, in South Hams next Monday. The early and continuous engagement with the local contract team, I mean, that's ongoing, and the level of scrutiny and the level of information flow back up to us is at a heightened level, more so than any of my other contracts, as I'm sure you'd appreciate. And similarly with your client officers or our client officers, your officers, that is happening. Additional resource will be in place to account, and bear in mind we're phasing it. that resource will naturally exist to the final rounds, and all the other engagements on the design, the productivity, the workforce engagement, again, all part of what we'll be doing. It's not to say we weren't doing it before, but increased focus on. As I say, that the phasing is something that we've spoken about with your exec in December, and something that we're pleased to see that you've agreed in your meeting. And with the IT preparedness, we would, excuse me, we will do the further and final checks, but in terms of the software issues, data issues, and so on, in terms of mobile data, not other data, those issues have been resolved, but there will be a focus to ensure that that continues and that we're not going to be tripped up with any software issues going forward. Thank you. That's me. I think next slide, please, Darryl, if that's okay. And I think it's just to reiterate, and I think the point was made at some of the exec meetings last year, even through the round change, the success in terms of percentage terms, in terms of number of residents that there were successful collections, was above 99%. Right, that is essentially what we're dealing with from a strategic point of view, accepting that you will all have individual examples where it doesn't look like success at all from your point of view, but from a contract management perspective and my perspective and Brian's perspective in terms of performance improvement, it is improving significantly and has improved significantly as a result of some of the interventions. And it's just, again, I think it was acknowledged in your paper that was referred to prior to my presentation, the contract was performing well prior to the round changes, and it will continue to perform well as and when the rounds have settled properly and finally, and the new service goes in. The success rate in normal times had improved from the point at which we, in terms of waste collection only, accepting there are other facets to this contract, had improved from the point at which we became the contractor back in April 2019. But again, you were still delivering a high level success prior to that. On what we're talking about in terms of collection success, in terms of completed rounds in normal circumstance, is 99.9%, which is a level broadly that we have never dropped below. Excepting we want to get back to that place, and we're much closer to that place than some of the frequent and multiple disruption that you experienced previously. But I just leave on that note, it's not to dwell on what we've done before and how great it was before. We accept where we are and what has happened. We accept some of the learning. We accept some of it was a little bit beyond our control, but we've put in measures to ensure that those issues are rectified and are rectifying themselves, and going forward, that we understand what has happened in South Hams that hasn't happened on other contracts before, and there's a heightened focus in terms of making sure that it's successful going forward. And I'm sure we'll move on to questions in a sec, but if you invite me back to overviewing scrutiny in 6 months, 12 months, I'm hoping that we can be talking about success rather than lessons learned with regards to some performance issues. I think that's it from me. Questions, and yes, right. Last slide. So
thank you, Mr. Barnfield. We have members wishing to ask questions.
Yeah.
Could I ask members just to ask one question and not enter into a dialogue with Mr. Barnfield? So one question per member. And could I ask that the questions be in general policy as opposed to specific problems within members' ward? So the first, and also I should be starting with questions from panel members, and then I'll go on to questions from non-panel members. The first member to ask a question is Councillor Austin. Councillor Austin, would you like to ask your question?
Hello. I understand we're in a situation now where we can impose penalties for non-collection to the company. So if there are sort of failures to collect and failures in the delivery of the service, there's now a financial penalty implication that's in place. Is that correct? And if it is, when do they start coming into effect, and how much are they? Have you any ideas on that?
Yeah, so what I can say is that with the contract, as is the same with any collection contract, there are performance deduction measures in the contract, and essentially there's a level below which, in terms of performance, or if an exceedance above in terms of misbin, that it's within the gift of the authority to charge a performance deduction for that above that level. I have to confess I'm not entirely sure what that level is, and I'm looking at Steve.
Mark, sorry, I can.
Sorry, Brian.
So it's Brian Ashby from FCC. Yes, we have had discussions with the management team about that. The amnesty, if you would like to call it, during the services, I think ended on the 5th of January. And yes, as far as we are aware and contractually, and I don't know if Steve wants to probably doesn't want to contradict me, contractually and as far as I'm aware, yes, we can start receiving specific penalties as of the 5th of January.
Mr. Molyneux, would you like to add to what's been said on this?
Only to confirm that yes, we will, as an authority, will be following the rules of the contract in terms of imposing any sanctions and penalties that are detailed within the contract. What I would suggest we do is, after this meeting, Chair, we'll send out a short briefing on how those penalties work, so that members are aware of the process that we go through, if that's acceptable.
Okay. Yes, thank you very much.
Chairman, can I just add to that, as far as I was concerned, if penalties is the right legal term, they came in 3 months after the round changes, and that was Tuesday of last week.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Baldry. Next, sorry, the next member is Councillor Thomas.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Barnfield, thank you for that presentation, which I have to say answered a lot of my questions. There is one specific question I have, though, which is that, notwithstanding the fact that your figures of satisfaction are very high, clearly you're aware that where problems were problems, they were very loud problems. They have caused this council and its councillors huge reputational damage in terms of the blame that automatically sits with the district council in the eyes of its constituents. Are there plans that FCC might produce a shortened version, a social media friendly version of this explanation that we can pass to our residents, that might go some way to explaining things like, yes, FCC possibly have done a rural round change before, and about the technology issues? Because most of the questions I've had about repeat failures, and I'm sure other councillors would have had the same, will have been a lot around about things like, don't they use maps? Don't they have Google Earth? Those sorts of things. Yeah. And having some sort of corporate response that we could share would be of tremendous help. Probably, I would argue, even more help than your presentation today.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. In terms of social media friendly explanation, it's not anything we'd considered, but we could certainly look at sort of condensing the explanation. I think the danger with that, if you simplify it too much without me or Brian explaining it, it could lose some of the value. But I will certainly take that away and speak to. We've got obviously a communication team within FCC and to see what could be possible, and a lot of the content, not all clearly, but a lot of the content, as you will know, in terms of more detail, would have been in the paper that we provided to support the request for the phased approach of the Devon Line service in December. But let me take that away, and we'll see what is possible then. I think if I speak with Stephen, Jane, and Brian on that, we can see what can be done.
Could I just reiterate that it is around the repeating of the miscollections. You've explained that to us
Yeah.
around IT, but the incredulity from the public wasn't that you might fail once, because as you say, in round changes, that is perfectly understandable. It was the
Yeah.
nature of the repeat failures. And I think it would be tremendously helpful for this council if we had something on which we could hang our coat, as it were.
Yeah, no, I totally accept that point, and we'll take that away and see what can be done with that. Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Callaghan.
Thanks very much. I was going to make a very similar point. It was about the repeated and then the repeated again misses, which the public were contacting us about, and it's quite difficult to explain really. People expect disruption, but they don't expect it time after time after time. And I think you might have touched on this, but I mean, I've spoken to a couple of the refuse collectors, and they've said sort of more than once that they feel that their local knowledge isn't perhaps utilised best. For example, when agency workers are used, I was told that that a couple of guys had offered to show them the ropes and explain the way the land lied, and they were told there wasn't enough time. And I'm wondering, perhaps local knowledge isn't perhaps fed back enough, and is there enough staff, supervisory staff? You've talked about supervisory staff being moved down. Perhaps local knowledge isn't used enough. Really, is what I'm suggesting.
Can I answer that one, Mark? Sorry.
Of course you can, Brian.
Yeah, I agree that may be the perception of some of the guys, and I think we did sort of reference it in the presentation, Councillor Callahan. It is very difficult. One, yes, sometimes there isn't that much time, but the problem is very often the person who wants to mentor an agency is not on the round that we're going to put the agency on, and our guys, particularly with what's happened down in South Hams, our guys are on very strict instructions to try and keep bubbles together. We really don't want swapping people around from cab to cab. So it may be sort of a communications sort of issue, but I fully suspect that is the reason why. Is yes, we've got a very, very capable and willing member of staff who wants to help. But we do have to temper that with we can't be moving people around because we don't want to repeat. So on a day-to-day basis, the management team are under reasonably strict instructions. We're not going to hit them with a stick or anything, but to try and keep to bubbles as much as we possibly can. We've got enough people coming in from outside of that we don't want to increase that ourselves. As far as supervisors, yes, we do need to draw on their knowledge. We certainly need to draw, and fully acknowledge this, we need to draw on the knowledge of some of these some of the loaders who know where these problems are, and we have addressed that, and that's what we're trying to do. Again, it is quite difficult with COVID restrictions when you consider you've got two fully grown and sometimes overgrown, in my case, men sort of standing around a computer trying to look at a map, trying to keep 2 meters apart in what is a small office. So we're trying to resolve all of those issues, and we have resolved many of them. But I would like to think that now, and over the last few weeks, we have started to draw on those experiences a lot more than we perhaps previously were.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Smurden.
Yep. Thank you, Chairman. First of all, as Councillor Thomas has already said, Mr. Barnfield, your presentation has answered quite a lot of the questions that I have. You've come and you've given us a detailed breakdown. You could have said, well, everything was all right, really, but you haven't. You've put your hands up and you've talked us through pretty much, everything that did go wrong, which is quite refreshing. I'd also like to pay tribute to our staff. They've been very helpful to members throughout, certainly during October and November. I can't imagine Natalie envisaged that she would be on a sort of weekly speed dial with a couple of grumpy councillors from South Brent, but she put up with it, and we got through it. You've explained with regard to it was a puzzle to me as to why you when you redeployed the crews, everything seemed to be thrown up in the air and dropped down, and nobody knew where they were going. You've explained that. and the problems with the in-cab technology. I mean, Councillor Panel and myself represent what is a very rural ward. It's got quite a lot of Dartmoor, etc. in it, and it's sort of no surprise to us that the in-cab technology didn't work very well. Down a lot of these Dartmoor lanes and Coombs, because the mobile phone signal in a lot of these is woeful. And you said the method that you used had worked well in other places, but I wonder whether you had taken into account, just how rural a lot of the South Hams is. And my real, the thing that I'd like to emphasise is that it appears that the technology was, to a certain extent, the Achilles heel of this. When we go forward with the new collection thing, can you reassure us that whatever technology is going to be lumped on in order to do that is up to scratch? I mean, I think you have said that, touched on that already, but that would be my plea really, is to make sure that it all works. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And Brian, Brian.
Do you want me to say, the more operational things, I think it's no disrespect, it's probably best I respond to. If you're happy with that, Councillor Smurden.
Yeah.
As far as the technology is concerned, yes, I think Mark sort of he did touch on it. It was to use a Donald Rumsfeld, it was an unknown known, right. Or a known unknown, whatever it was. We were under the impression that everything was working, and there were some quite active discussions between the crews and the supervisors where we were accusing them of not doing things, and they were saying, no, look, we're doing it. If you did it in the depot, it worked. There was all kinds of reasons, but it then came back to it was a software issue which our software supplier has acknowledged and we have resolved. We will be using the same software, but all we will be doing is changing the rounds. So the software is now working to 99%, if not more. There are still some issues, as you say, there are some issues with connectivity. We are looking at other ways on some of the more rural areas. We're looking at, I don't know if you've heard of it, this 3 simple words location stuff that's going around. We're looking to see if that is compatible.
What 3 words, isn't it?
Yes, what 3 words or something like that. Yes, which gives you to a 3 cubic meters of a spot.
Okay.
Because that has been the problem. Is the sat navs on the devices have been taking us down roads which we think are the road, but it's actually the road that we should be on is the road that is 50 yards running parallel to the side of it. So we are resolving all of those, and these are all things that we are getting ready for the next phase.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've reassured me. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Spencer.
Thank you, Chair. You've introduced a precondition which I certainly wasn't aware of, and I don't know if other councillors were, that we're restricted to 1 question. I don't feel that I could obtain the sort of clarification that I need by being so restricted. So I withdraw my request to speak.
Councillor Spencer, how many questions have you got?
Haven't added them up, John, to be honest, but
right.
There might well be half a dozen. I don't know.
Councillor Spencer, can I perhaps put you at the end of the queue, and then hopefully some of your questions may have been answered, and then we'll do a mop up from there. Is that okay?
Okay.
Yeah. Councillor Sweet.
Hi, is Councillor Kemp, I think, in front of me?
No, she's not on the panel. It's panel members first.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Thank you. Yes, thank you so much for your very fulsome presentation. It is all frustrating. The whole time's been really frustrating, and that's really come across. I was going to mention the what 3 words app. I think that's really useful, but I also think, with the best one in the world and the best technology and IT in the world, we are in a rural area, and some routes just are never going to be picked up on. I wonder if there are further changes to be made, or when there are, because there always is going to be. And hopefully we're out of the COVID situation when that happens. But at the moment I understand that we have to kind of use the bubbles. But would something as simple as actually having a previous round member leading the way in a separate vehicle, so that the collection vehicles are actually going in convoy with a private car or a hire car, could something like that be used so that local knowledge isn't lost, and within a week or two of that being used, then the new team would know where they were going? Because I can't see that the best IT and the best software in the world are any kind of replacement for personal local knowledge. So I don't know if that's something that could be considered. I've had a member of the public actually making a complaint about stickers being used on non-collection bins or uncollected bins, and the West Devon stickers have been being put on South Ham's bins. So I know that's a tiny detail, but I've had 2 members of the public and one consistently complaining about that. So
can Mr. Ashby, can you answer this, please?
Quite happy. I mean, I'll be honest with you, we will consider anything. We've got our own plans, but I'm not arrogant enough to say that everything we're going to do is perfect, and somebody else hasn't got a better idea. That would certainly work if we continue to have the problems. We've got the extra resource coming in next week. We know the properties now that we've had problems with. We know the problems now that we've had repeated problems with, and that as it stands at the moment, and hopefully Mr. Molyneux can confirm this, we're talking about people who have had repeated problems, if you like, in December, sits at about 180 residents. We know who they are. I know that sounds a bit foreboding, but we know who they are, and that is what this extra resource is going to concentrate on more than anything else, is making sure that we have got everything in place, an almost a step-by-step guide of where that property is, how you locate it. In some cases, when you get to the property where the bin is, because that's become more apparent, is because it is such a rural area, people are putting things, their bags and etc. in boxes and bins. We wouldn't normally recommend or promote our guys going around opening people's boxes in their back gardens. So until we know that, so we're now putting that on the ticket, saying it is in the wooden box at the end of the driveway. That's where it is stored. So all of those things we are trying to capture, and that is, we've got another couple of months. I know it's going away quickly, but we've got a couple of months of this dedicated resource, and pretty much I can guarantee you these crews that have these problem properties on will have a step-by-step guide on how to find these properties. We will run that past the management team, and hopefully we can reassure them that that's how it's going to work, and that is all part of this plan now moving forward. But I am not adverse to having somebody in a hired car showing them where to go. I have no problem with that at all.
Thank you very much. Thank you. If I could move on to Councillor Mackay.
Sorry. Okay. I've got quite a few questions, but I'm going to try and just limit myself to. I mean, I appreciate that you put up some statistics there that showed that your performance was pretty good, but I think in the urban areas it has been very good, and there hasn't been particularly any problems. But in the rural areas, and certainly in my ward, I've just had endless emails, and the presentation was very informative, and I understand that you have been trying your best. But one of the notable things about it was the use of the past tense. I'm still getting emails, and there's people that are whose bins have been repeatedly missed, and they're not in particularly out of the way areas. And there's sort of odd situations where villages are divided in half due to the changes, so that some half of the village gets done on one day and half, and these are just little villages. I mean, it serves to confuse everybody. And there is the ongoing issue of the size of vehicles. I mean, and again, this is a repeat thing. Repeatedly being told you can't send that vehicle down here; it's far too big. And the previous situation, the previous round, before the round changes, everything was working fine. And what I don't understand really is why, when migrating to the new rounds, the constraints that had been built up and shown to work in the old rounds don't seem to have been taken account of. I mean, it's not about lost knowledge; it's about central control, which seems to have just. And I don't really know how these rounds are designed, whether they're designed through software or whether just somebody sits down and tries to work it out with a spreadsheet. I've really no idea, but certainly the technology exists to do that. I mean, basically, this is the travelling salesman problem with knobs on, and there is software out there to solve these problems. But and I would just like to understand how it is that these repeat things are still going on, and it doesn't seem to me to be down to IT. I mean, the IT that was used to control the previous rounds is still extant, I take it, and hopefully been improved. So, is IT necessarily the culprit here? And one other point I'd like to make, and then I'll shut up, is that I was talking to one of your employees, basically, one of the crews, and he was telling me that he has yet to go on the same round twice. So the bubbles, I mean, they may be. I can understand why that's necessary, but I don't see why from one week to the next that bubble would not still be doing the same rounds. But he says that's not happening. So any information that you can give me on any of all of that, I'd be very grateful.
As far as that last point, without the specifics, and I really can't answer specific questions today, so without knowing who that person was, but I do reiterate that the management and the supervisory teams are supposed to be keeping crews together, which would then dictate that they would be doing the same rounds on a week by week basis. So I really can't answer that one, but I can check with if there are any instances, and I'm sure there will be a few, but there certainly shouldn't be anywhere where they're not doing the same the same round day in, day out, week in, week out. But as I say, I can certainly check if that is the instance and put a stop to that, because it certainly should not be happening. And just very quickly, in the reference to the vehicle size, yes, we did use a software solution, which was we did run past. The local team did have some say in that, and what was put into that was the information that we got from the local team. So, we have to. We have to review that, which is what we are doing as part of the next phase, which is obviously the bigger vehicles, if you like. The problem is they're bigger in some instances, but they're not heavier. And previously, everything was done on tonnage rather than volume of the size of the vehicles. So our small vehicles were 12-ton vehicles. Well, the recycling vehicles are all 12-ton vehicles. So we have been doing quite some considerable work. And when I say we, the local team, the supervisors and management have been doing quite some considerable work on trying to make sure that we get the right vehicles down the right rounds. And we are still moving vehicles around. And yes, I know we keep referencing it in the past tense, but I've said a few times, we do still have properties where we have problems. I'm not going to sit here and deny that, because I can't. But we are constantly resolving those as and when they come up.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I then ask Councillor Jackson to ask her question, please?
Yeah, it's a really quick question. You're a Spanish company. Brexit had an impact on your operations?
I'll probably take that one, Brian.
Yep.
In terms of the services that we deliver for yourselves, no. I guess from an organisation point of view, we're not just a waste collection or street scene company. We have energy from waste plants, landfill, material trading teams, recycling plants, and so on. So where material was being exported, there was a potential risk, but again, not impacting you. I think one of our biggest fears was potentially with environmental service contracts was fuel shortage or supply chain issues. Not really a concern, or it hasn't materialised that way. We were looking at bunkering fuel at one point, but we're kind of through that. I guess going forward, if we have, in the case of they are coming, and it's not going to be an issue in South Hams, the cycling vehicles are manufactured in Ireland, so obviously EU, but we're not experiencing issues there. So a few peripheral issues in other parts of our business, but not for the services that we deliver yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Kemp.
Hi there. I just wondered if a lot of the round problems were created by binning off the existing staff. Is that correct? Excuse the pun.
Yeah, binning off. We as far as I'm aware, we haven't. Well, other than for indiscretions, we haven't got rid of any staff. In fact, we have more staff than we had previously.
Right.
So,
are they staff from the existing rounds then?
Yes.
That you still have. Okay.
Yes. Yep. We haven't made anybody redundant. Well, no. I would know. So I haven't been in this all the way through, but no, we haven't made anybody redundant. But what we have done is had to move them around, which is what I think they're pushing back against. But other than for disciplinary matters, I don't think we've got rid of anybody.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Patton.
Thank you.
Sorry, was that me, Chairman?
Yes, it is.
Oh,
yes.
Thank you. A lot of my worries have been answered. Thank you. Clearly, our residents identify the council, not our contractors, as responsible for their collection service, and it's the councillors who've been in the firing line. So I'd like to thank again the officers for their help and support, and also thank FCC for their work in keeping the system going when the COVID outbreak happened. So that was really good. And just one very quick question. I've had it said to me that by several residents that the teams have said to them that when the problems were at their height, that the management weren't listening to the crews who sort of had some idea of what was going on the ground. Can I have an assurance that the management will listen to the crews and try and work and cooperate with them to learn from the people who are on the ground?
Yeah, that's probably more me than Mark. Yes, I can absolutely give you that guarantee. I would be very. I can't say because I'm not there every day, but I would be very surprised if that was the case. Maybe that may be the impression, and I'm not going to argue with that impression, but we know, and I believe now the local team knows that we cannot do this ourselves. We need the guys out on the streets to help us with this, and absolutely yes, certainly as part of the next phase of this. There will be a lot more consultation, which Mark has referenced. I can't say why it didn't happen before. I don't know, but I would expect the crews to be seeing these rounds weeks before they're actually started or expected to undertake them. So the guarantee that I can give you is yes, we will be consulting with the staff more, and where we can, because don't forget it's not always feasible to do what they're suggesting, but we will let them know why we can't do that. We will feed back to them on that.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to go backward because I'm quite pleased to see that a lot of the things have been ironed out. I've only had one email in since Christmas, I think, rather than 5 or 6 a day. My question is really that we're in very rural, as most of Southampton is, but mine is particularly, and some of these vehicles, although not heavier, would be no doubt longer. So is that question being raised? And also, is it the same gangs that have been doing the thing since the 8th of October? Are they going to be moved on to the new, when we roll out the new system, are they going to be rolled on to new vehicles? Thank you.
If I can answer the second question first, yes, and then some. So it will be those existing crews that are doing it now, plus we will need more crews because we need additional vehicles to carry out the curbside sort system. So it will be a mixture of those, and hopefully, I can't guarantee it obviously, but hopefully we'll be in a position where we can start sharing some of that knowledge a little bit better than we've been able to for the last few months. In that we can make sure that we've got an experienced person on each crew. Obviously that might not be possible in March, but yeah, we'll just have to keep an eye on that. But your first point is exactly right. Is yes, it has been on weight. The 12-ton Rome equipped vehicles that we're purchasing, they are longer, they are less manoeuvrable. And yes, we are trying to incorporate that into everything that we are doing. I can't sit here hand on heart and say that we will get it 100% right, because there will be somewhere that we will have a problem with one of those vehicles, but we have alternative vehicles that we can, we can do a very quick move around and make sure that we've got the right vehicles in there. They are the same vehicles that have been used elsewhere in Devon. I know that, I've used them elsewhere in the country in a previous life as well. So they do get to most places, but I totally agree that South Hams is, yes, very rural.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Hodgson.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I just have a couple of questions, actually. One is about the online reporting that go. You hearing me okay?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I was getting a bit of funny feedback then. Yeah, the online reporting, it seems to have been quite a frustration with a lot of the customers. I'm just wanting to check that that's kind of been hopefully sorted out, because I understand that people had to report a missed bin within a couple of days. And of course, sometimes people are thinking, oh, well, I won't report it, I'll wait for them to come back. And I just think that maybe could be looked at, so that, OK, maybe I can understand that you want people to quickly report so that maybe it can be sort of picked up in that day or two. But I think that should be available for people to report a missed bin, on a sort of like, a missed bin on a date in a separate way, so they're not expecting a quick feedback, because I think that's really important, because then otherwise, us as councillors, we just get all the emails reporting it in, and then we're sort of going around the houses with it all. Secondly, oh sorry, I just can't remember what I was going to say now. Yeah, if you could just answer that one, I'll reply to I'll come up with my second point as well, if I may.
Okay, I think that's probably one that perhaps Steve Molyneux needs to answer, because the reporting system is a council-based system. So as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Thank you, Brian. What I would say, Councillor Hodgson, is that when normal business was working, the reporting system works okay. The problem that we had is that when FCC did the round changes and were missing lots of bins, they ended up in a position where the crews were missing the bins, and then they may have been going back, or they may not have been going back, and that's where that whole time delay issue came in to play. So people were leaving the bins out because that's what we were telling them to, and then the bins weren't still being collected because FCC genuinely missed it, as opposed to knowing that they'd missed it, if you know what I'm saying. So they were not completing their rounds. So there was some bins that they knew they'd not missed, and knew they had to go back on, and there were other bins that they didn't know that they'd missed. So we ended up in this scenario where we were so out of sync that it caused the system wasn't working properly because people were trying to report after the time. What I would say, and Jane can come back on this, is that generally, from a normal perspective, the 2-day reporting window works for normal business as usual. And one of the enhancements that FCC put in place on taking on the contract is you now get more detail on future collections and when they're due, whereas it's a much better system than what the council had in place prior to the FCC contract. I hope that helps. It may not do, but it's the best I can do.
Councillor Hodgson, did you have another question?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I'm not entirely happy with that because I do think actually a little bit more flexibility on the reporting in would be really helpful. For example, like we do have with, other reporting things for highways, etc. Well, that's not us, that's Devon. But yeah, the other point I just wanted to ask really was for SCC as an environmental company that deal with a lot of waste. I just wonder if they have an aspirational waste recycling target that they have within the company in terms of how much of the waste that they collect one way and another, how much of that they're actually aspiring to recycle. I know we've got our own targets, but I'm just wondering what theirs is.
Yeah, I can perhaps take that. I mean, I think I touched upon it with regards to the Brexit question. In terms of our range of operations across the UK and Europe, in fact, our portfolio is quite mixed. So we have 6 operational energy from waste plants. So that will take residual feedstock. Clearly, they're not classed as recycling plants as such. We have material recycling facilities, and we have household waste recycling facilities, and they've all got their respective recycling targets, which are linked to various factors, and there may be targets that yourselves have as local authorities. And you're also dependent, for example, you're going to the Devon Line service, your system will in part dictate how successful your recycling service is. So, for example, in South Hams, the volume, the capacity is increasing, and the frequency and the opportunity to recycling is increasing. So you should see a benefit and an increase in that. But the targets will be essentially yourselves. Some contracts are different, but because of the diverse mix, it's difficult to set any organisational recycling target. However, as you guys as an authority be aware, in terms of net zero and climate change, that's something as an organisation in terms of, and moving forward, I think more prevalent, understanding your carbon baseline and your carbon targets moving towards net zero in 2050 or whatever the target is for a particular authority, that will probably in years to come become more prevalent than a percentage target of recycler, because the carbon benefit of recycling some material isn't as good as others. So that needs to be considered going forward. So in answer to the question, no, but there's a good reason for that. But on locally, we do in line with local authority contracts.
Thank you, Mr. Bowles.
But anyway, okay, thank you.
So, Councillor Spencer, I hope some of the questions you had may have been answered. Would you like to? Oh, you see, you've had to leave. Is Councillor Spencer still with us? No.
Chairman, can I speak?
One second. Yes, go on, Councillor Baldry.
I was just going to say to Councillor Spencer, because I think you've been very lenient with some non-panel members, allowing them more than one question. To be fair to Councillor Spencer, if he contacts me, I'm happy to set up a one-to-one meeting between him and FCC where he can ask his questions direct.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Councillor Baldry. Councillor Kemp, you've already asked one question, and you're not a panel member. Is it a really urgent or important question?
No, it's actually being covered by Councillor Hodgson, so thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. So I have no other questions from members. There isn't a recommendation on the papers, on the report as such. So I'd like to put forward a recommendation from the chair, and it revolves around 4.1 of the report. If I read this out slowly, the recommendation is to thank FCC for its presentation In respect of the new recycling service being introduced in March 2021, the panel requests FCC to demonstrate that they, and then there's the 4 bullet points that are at 4.1. In other words, we're asking them to demonstrate that they do that. And then to conclude, further, FCC is requested to report back to the panel at its meeting on the 1st of July 2021. I'll just repeat that again. The panel thanks FCC for its presentation. In respect of the new recycling service being introduced in March 2021, the panel requests FCC to demonstrate that they, 1, have a robust deliverable plan that will deliver the new service with the absolute minimum disruption to residents. 2, have sufficient management and supervision on the contract. 3, ensure sufficient staff training and commitment. And 4, have appropriate contingency in place. And then further, FCC is requested
Chairman, sorry, I didn't mean to. Could I add a 5th one?
Well, I haven't finished yet, Councillor Smurd.
Right, fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further, FCC is to report back to the panel at its meeting on the 1st of July. Perhaps, Councillor Smurd, if I could just deal with this first. So
it's merely a fifth bullet point. That's all.
Okay. Would you like to add that?
Yes, that FCC are satisfied that the IT used is fit for purpose.
Okay. Can we add that as a 5th bullet point then? Daryl, will you be able to put that on the screen, or is that asking too much?
I can. It will take a couple of minutes, Chair. I can if you wish.
I think that would be helpful. Do members mind waiting? I think it's important that if you could put that on the screen.
Okay.
Sorry, Chairman, I didn't mean to hold the meeting
No,
up.
no, it's okay.
Chairman, while that's happening, can I just make a couple of concluding remarks?
Yes, please.
Right. I am quite happy, based on what I've heard, to accept the recommendations you've made. I would like to thank FCC for their excellent answers to most of the questions and explain it. I hope members are better informed, but to rest assured that we as an executive and our officers will be keeping an eye on this almost on a daily basis, long before they come back to you next July or whenever you say. But this has been a positive meeting. I don't want to end on a negative meeting, but just to say that members have been briefed on COVID and the possible problems over the weeks and months ahead. And of course, our staff and FCC staff are not immune from getting COVID and having to isolate because friends and neighbours have. So everything is dependent on us being able to deliver the service. It's dependent on the fact that we have as many staff on duty and not absent for isolating reasons. But just really, my positive note at the end, I think this has been a very worthwhile airing of people's problems. And as several members have said, the public regard it as Southam's bin collection, not FCC. And I want to thank members who've taken an awful lot of flack as a result of the problems over the past few months. Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. I've tried to fill the gap and he's only got as far as number 2. God.
Well, I'm happy to in the meantime just extend our thanks, or FCC's thanks, for the opportunity to be able to speak to you guys. We know it's been frustrating for members, for officers, and indeed for the contract team and ourselves. I can assure you that we feel it as well, and we want to get it right. And as I say, we are committed to making this work, and look forward to engaging with you as we go. But yeah, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Can I just very quickly add to that as well? So assuming it's appropriate. All I would like to say is, I am obviously, it would have to come through probably Steve Molyneux and Jane, but if anybody like Councillor Spencer does have any specific questions that they want to ask, I am, we didn't put up our contact details on our slide like the previous presentation, but I am quite happy to answer specific questions from councillors if they want to do that. They may have to go through Steve just purely for process, but I am quite happy to do that, and hopefully we can answer these questions fairly quickly. And also, just one more thing, I know that you've quite rightly thanked your staff and your management team. I would just like to say, the vast majority, 99.99% of the South Hams operations crew are 100%. They are just working flat out to get this done. We've witnessed them, and we've had stories of them going above and beyond, as many as we have of them not. And I just think I would like to thank. They are FCC employees. We did inherit them, if you like, from you, but I genuinely think they are doing everything that they possibly can, and it is now incumbent on me to make sure that we give them the tools to do that job, and that is what I will be doing.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Right, the recommendation is on the screen. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Chairman, I'll second.
Right. Would any member wish to say or say anything in response to the recommendation? No. So can I take it that the panel agrees the recommendation and that it's passed? If there's any member who wishes to vote against, can they please indicate in the chat box? In that case, the recommendation is carried. Nobody in the chat box, Chair. Thank you very much indeed. And can I thank Mr. Barnfield and Mr. Ashby for your presentation and for answering the questions, and it's much appreciated. And we look forward to seeing you on the 1st of July, where hopefully there'll be lots of smiles. Yeah,
we hope so too.
Yes, definitely.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we could now move on to the last item on the agenda, which is the annual ONS work programme. Our next meeting is on the 25th of February. There is on the paper a task and finish group update. Well, there isn't one, so that can be deleted. The leisure contract is not a Fusion annual report, it would be a Fusion update. Then there's the housing strategy, outcome of public consultation exercise, and it's proposed that we add to the list connecting Devon and Somerset programme update. And that, as far as the meeting on the 1st of April and the items still to be considered for scheduling, bearing in mind the situation we're in, I propose that I, along with Vice Chairman Councillor Smearden, meet with Mr. Molyneux to agree or come up with proposals for the work programme on the 1st of April, and that will be put before the panel at its meeting on the 25th of February. Are members happy with that approach and also happy with the amendments and additions to the work programme for the meeting on the 25th of February? Is there any member who disagrees? No, I think that's agreed. That being the case, the meeting is concluded. Thank you very much indeed. And it was a long meeting, but there was a lot to get through. So thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, members. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, yeah.
Thanks.
Well done, John. Well chaired. Long day.
Yes.
Thanks, John.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye. All the best. Bye.